Leela brings boxes of donuts into the Woodcrest Theater Valley building to share with her colleagues. She offers one to Evan, after which, she distributes all donuts and heads to the board meeting. She briefs the board members on how successful their Christmas Carol production has been, and she shares her future plans for more productions. Even though she has been doing a good job, the board members need faster progress. So they have decided to bring in another person on board as Marty's replacement after his retirement. Glenn McCornish will be the new marketing director for Woodcrest Theater Valley. Everyone has high hopes for him except Leela, who immediately sits back down as soon as she hears his name. Glenn enters the room and is introduced to all board members, including Leela, who is the theater manager. His expression also slightly changes when he sees her. He starts to share his ideas for increasing audiences during the holiday season. One of them is to introduce Flora as their guest ballerina for the production of The Nutcracker. Leela points out that it might be too late for that, because all parts have been cast. But he thinks that roles can be moved around. He gets the green light to bring Flora on board, along with the extra costs. He also informs Leela that the flyers she just got printed will now be wasted, because new ones need to be made featuring Flora. Leela later rants to her assistant, Marie, about Glenn in her office. She knows him from high school, when he was horrible and constantly pulled pranks on her. She recounts the time he turned her teeth and mouth black for 3 days by adding a dye to her soda. The incident with the flyer is enough to prove to Leela that Glenn was trying to spite her. Marie advises her not to hold on to a grudge for so many years. Since they will work together now, she thinks it's better for Leela to let it go. Leela understands this, but still doesn't plan on being too warm with Glenn. Glenn sits in the audience seats and from there, he watches Leela manage things. She makes some edits to the material that Steve wrote and commands him to convey it to the others. Glenn tries to initiate a conversation with her, but she is about to walk out, so he stops her. He clarifies that he didn't want to step on anyone's toes at the board meeting. But Leela thinks that the ballet director will disagree. Glenn argues that he just has the theater's best interest in mind. But Leela takes this personally. He realizes that this conversation is going awry and starts again. He greets her by expressing that it's nice to see her after so many years. But this isn't enough for Leela, who feels like she deserves more for enduring high school with him. Glenn seems confused and hesitantly asks her if they dated, which offends her even more. That evening, she visits her brother Chris at his house, which is filled with the smell of the food he is cooking with his wife, Amy. Amy calls her daughter Lacey to inform her about her Aunt Leela's arrival. Leela did make it on time today, but would have to head back to the theater after some time to check on a few things. Lacey comes down and gives Leela a hug, waiting for her to start decorating the Christmas tree with her. Meanwhile, Leela mentions Glenn McCornish to her, Chris, and Amy, as they also went to the same high school. They remember Glenn as the guy who tormented Leela throughout high school and are sorry to hear that she will now work with him. Leela further complains that he didn't even recognize her, let alone apologize for his past behavior. Leela is really annoyed at Glenn being all smiles, as if he thinks they're old pals meeting after years. Meanwhile, Glenn comes back home to his parents' house, where his mother is struggling to get her mouth guard out of the drain. His dad, a mute man, is knitting a sweater for him to give as a Christmas present. Glenn proceeds to get under the sink to help his mom find her mouth guard. This is when she asks about his first day at work, so he reports that it was good, since most of the people were nice to him. He asks his mom whether the name Leela Ramsey rings a bell, since they were in the same class in high school. However, he wouldn't call her an old friend, because she never appreciated his sense of humor as a kid. His mother is sure that it is all in the past now, but Glenn knows that he made things worse by pretending not to recognize her. Glenn's mother recalls how she used to tease her husband when they were kids, because she secretly liked him. She finds it surprising to this day how her husband picked up on her crush, but Glenn doesn't think this applies to him and Leela. His mother proposes that a good apology can still fix matters between them, since it never hurts to say sorry. Glenn manages to find the mouthguard which his mom washes right there, causing the water to drip down on him. The next day at work, Glenn meets his assistant, Zeke. He was appointed by the owner, Helen, to help Glenn settle at his new workplace. Zeke has been working here for almost a year and enjoys it, because he loves theater. Glenn wants to know about Leela and learns that she was made manager 4 months ago, but has been working here for years. She is loved by everyone, since she keeps things going while also keeping everyone happy. Zeke lets her know that a meeting, or rather a gathering, is happening soon, one that he shouldn't miss. The gathering is so the whole company can draw names for Secret Santa, which Glenn finds very unusual. Leela discusses what and how many gifts they will have to give out this year, while everyone else gathers. Leela and Marie make a bet every year where the first one to guess their Secret Santa wins. Marie would win every year, and this year, the winner will get treated to a pedicure. Helen starts the meeting by going on about how far the company has come since its founding 5 years ago. She expects everyone to display some Christmas spirit at their company's annual Secret Santa gift exchange. Her colleague, Tobias, joins in to explain all the rules. One person has to draw a name to be their Santa. Then, they'll have to leave 1 gift per week at that person's desk until Christmas. After this, everyone's Secret Santa will be revealed. Everyone starts drawing their names and Glenn sends Zeke to draw for him too. When he brings back the paper, Zeke has Leela, so Glenn switches with him. Zeke jokes that Glenn switched because he might have a crush on Leela, but he just stares at him in response. Sometime later, the theater's production for A Christmas Carol begins and Leela greets all the audience members and sits them down. Glenn stands beside her, but she doesn't acknowledge him at all. He talks to her and learns that she keeps standing watch throughout most shows because the theater is her responsibility. She remains ready in case anything comes up, like a malfunction, injury, or a customer complaint. He reminds her that the stage manager is responsible for all that, along with Tobias, who overlooks customer service. She lets him know that she likes to overlook things himself, adding that he is free to go home. He gladly takes her up on that offer and leaves, after calling her a micromanager. Marie and Leela go Christmas present shopping the next morning and Marie shares that she drew Tobias' name. She must be creative with his gifts because he is the ballet director. Leela lets Marie know that Tobias is really down to earth when he is not focusing on perfecting the ballet. We find out Leela herself got one of the stage crew, Steve, and she already has some ideas about what to give him. She then gets a text from her brother, who wants to set a meeting for them to get together and take photos for their mom's Christmas card. This tradition used to be fun, but feels more like a chore now because the rules are very strict. The next morning, Glenn sees that Zeke has already received his first present from his secret Santa. Now, Glenn regrets his choice to choose Leela because he has no idea what to get her. Zeke gives him the idea of buying some cookies and putting them in a nice bag to give to Leela. Glenn follows this advice and leaves the bag of cookies on Leela's desk. He is stepping out of her office when he notices her approaching and gets worried that he might be caught sneaking in. So he talks shop with her before walking away. When she arrives at her office, Leela is overjoyed to find the cookies on her desk because she loves them. She doesn't know that Glenn is looking at her, and it warms his heart to see her happy. Leela munches on one cookie and shares with Glenn that these are her guilty pleasures. She wonders how her secret Santa knew about her obsession with these cookies and offers them to Glenn too. He admits that he had never had one before. One bite is enough to convince Glenn too that these are some of the best cookies he has ever tasted. He then hands a contract to Leela and she realizes that the legal department usually handles these matters. Glenn makes up an excuse and urges Leela to sign the contract he brought over, instead of letting her enjoy the cookies in peace. Leela questions his choice of bringing in Flora, because she is quite expensive, despite being talented. Glenn argues that he is getting the friends and family discount, but Leela doesn't agree with this. He hands her the contract anyway and she accidentally gets a paper cut from it. Leela plans on checking out the contract later, and only then will she sign it. Glenn asks for one more cookie, but she refuses to share them with people who aren't nice. As she takes a bite, half of her cookie falls on her desk and Glenn picks it up swiftly. Leela calls him a thief as he walks out of her office smugly. After getting her photo taken for her family's Christmas card, Leela breaks the news to her family members that she won't be staying the whole weekend with them, because she is slammed with work. They are disappointed to hear this, and expresses how they would have loved her presence and participation in all the festive activities that happen every year. Glenn finds his gift on his desk the next day at work and almost jumps when Zeke sneaks up on him. Zeke has been on the lookout to see who dropped off the present for Glenn, but his efforts are fruitless. Glenn opens the present and brings out a cute snow globe that Zeke immediately starts to play with. We then see him later in a meeting with Leela and Tobias, who are unhappy with bringing in a new artist at the last minute. Glenn assures them that bringing Flora in will guarantee a full house, because he has seen the effect she has on sales. Tobias wants Flora to have her fitting on the first day she arrives, so that the rehearsals that follow flow smoother. As the meeting concludes, Glenn thanks Leela for her cooperation. They talk a bit about work and come up with nicknames to address Flora, whose full name is really long. Leela looks for her pen and he gets it for her because it's tucked behind her ear. Glenn points out that it is almost lunchtime and invites her to grab something to eat together. They go to a restaurant, and Glenn recalls that Leela used to work in this place back in high school. Leela mentions that he'd come to this place with his friends and they'd make the greatest mess while she was cleaning the tables. Leela has a list of incidents where he made her life horrible. Glenn either doesn't remember them to be that bad, or thinks that it was all casual fun for laughs. Leela reiterates that it was all mortifying for her, and now regrets coming to lunch with him. She is about to leave when Glenn owns up to his mistake. He urges her to move forward like a professional because he apologized already. This makes Leela angry, but she believes she can stay professional without forgetting all the hurt he caused her. He doesn't get a clean slate just because he said sorry. On that note, she deserts him at lunch. Leela and Marie are discussing next year's budget when Marie dishes out the lunch Leela had with Glenn. She saw them leaving together and Leela claims that the food was the only good thing about that lunch. She didn't like his company and thinks that everyone finds him nice because they don't know the real him. Leela opens up to Marie about how Glenn played nice with her once, only to make her end up covered in cow manure later. That ruined her Christmas that year and was very humiliating, as people from her school still call her that. Leela warns Marie to not be fooled by Glenn, but Marie conveys her a message from Glenn, who sent it through Zeke, probably because he was scared of Leela. The women don't know that Glenn is hearing this whole conversation, and now he feels terrible. Leela gets another paper cut, which happens to her almost every day. This time, she got it from a list of items they must provide for Flora, and Marie volunteers to handle the tedious task. A week later, Glenn discovers Zeke in his office trying to guess what's in his second present. Zeke apologizes for overstepping his boundaries, and guesses that Glenn has been given another snow globe. Zeke is proven to be right, and he briefs Glenn on the progress they've made at work so far. Glenn also seeks his counsel on what to give to Leela next. He realizes that he will now have to do more research on what she likes, as to not give her anything generic. Eventually, he comes up with a brilliant idea on his own. Leela finds a present on the trunk of her car, which she thinks is a clever way to deliver the gift. She gets a pack of bandages with a note to go easy on her hands, which cracks her up. Glenn watches from afar, pleased with her reaction. Leela is at dinner with her family, who signed up for a Sub for Santa initiative at Lacey's request. They have to deliver the family's gifts next week, and Leela knows already that she can't join them. She wants to contribute to the gifts, but Lacey is sad about her everlasting absence from holiday events. Meanwhile, Glenn also spends time with his parents and rants to them about how stressed he is with work lately. People expect a lot from him, and he doesn't want to disappoint anyone. He also talks about a woman at the theater who isn't her biggest fan, but he's trying to fix that. He admits that he keeps thinking of ways to make her happy, because he loves it when she smiles because of him. He also talks about being now aware of the damage his childhood pranks used to cause people, pointing out how he isn't the same person anymore. However, right now he just doesn't know how to show that he's changed to Leela, and he also doesn't know why he cares so much about what she thinks of him. In the next scene, Glenn runs into Leela in the break room as they are both at the office on a holiday weekend. She is trying to satiate her hunger by drinking eggnog, so he offers to share his Thanksgiving leftovers with her. They sit down together to eat, and Glenn brings up that his mom cooked this meal. Glenn then drops some of the food on a scarf his dad made for him. He elaborates that his dad learned to crochet after he had a stroke a few years ago. Crocheting allowed his dad to gain back his dexterity and some control over his life. This was the first scarf Glenn's dad finished, and he is now trying to teach the skill to Glenn too. They have a good time at lunch, which is a surprising first for both of them. Leela forgets her pen, and Glenn keeps it. In the next scene, Leela wraps the present for Steve and discreetly places it on his table, only to be caught red-handed by Glenn. They watch Steve get his present, which Leela picked out, keeping usefulness in mind. This is more thoughtful than Glenn's secret Santa, who has been giving him nothing but snow globes. Based on that, Leela instantly figures out who Glenn's secret Santa is, but doesn't disclose the information. Glenn sneaks into Leela's empty office with a wreath made out of pens, just for her, because she keeps losing them. He also leaves a note while Marie and Leela make plans for lunch. She shows the pen wreath to Marie, who is jealous of her getting such an awesome secret Santa. Leela is quite impressed because all her presents have been something she needs or loves. Marie suspects that this is a guy's work, judging by the way the bows are tied. She even guessed that this particular guy might have a crush on her, judging by how thoughtful the gifts are. Marie agrees with her crush theory, and the name Nick comes up. However, Nick has a girlfriend, so they know it's not him. Marie's next guess, Devin, doesn't even know Leela's correct name, which brings her to shift suspicion to Evan. Leela argues that he isn't observant enough. They explore and reject one option after another until Leela reaches the conclusion that she's grateful for whoever her secret Santa is. She has 3 more weeks and 3 more gifts to receive in order to figure out her secret Santa's identity, unless Marie beats her to it. They then come up with the idea of going ice skating with their colleagues to continue their investigations on their secret Santas. Glenn is at his parents' house fixing their fire alarm when he gets a call from work. Flora has added items to her list of required things, but this isn't Glenn's job, so he passes the task along to someone else. His parents are starting to have their reservations about his job at the theater, but he assures them that it'll be okay. In the next scene, Leela shows up at the ice skating rink for their office outing, but she forgot her gloves. Marie later explains to Glenn that she invited him because he hasn't had any chances of making friends at the theater yet. Marie reminds Leela not to be heartless. Meanwhile, Glenn notices that it is Zeke's first time skating on ice. Leela shows up to help him, which leads to her and Glenn skating and talking together. Glenn shares with Leela that he was fired from his last job because the product he was promoting failed spectacularly. But he still had an impressive resume, which is why he committed to the theater. Leela also mentions her lack of free time and overwhelming amounts of work. She is still getting the knack of management. Thankfully, she already knows the theater inside and out. They both need this season to go well, but Glenn teaches her that she doesn't always have to take everyone's responsibility on her shoulders. While they get hot chocolate, Leela questions why Glenn came to his hometown to get a new job, instead of going somewhere else. He explains that he wasn't there for his parents when his dad had a stroke, and it was really hard on his mom. It made sense to move closer to his parents and be there for them. Leela finally sees that Glenn is capable of being nice, because he sincerely apologizes to her this time. Leela thinks that this can be a start of a positive relationship. Marie rants to Leela the next day at work about getting a brownie mix as her 4th present. Leela received gloves, so now they can narrow their list of the people who were at the ice skating rink. Marie feels threatened by Leela's short list of suspects, and she brings up Glenn too. but Leela thinks it's Zeke because of how nervous he was that night. This conversation is interrupted by the news of a ballerina getting hurt, and she was supposed to play the Ice Queen. Tobias and Leela are trying to look for a solution, when Glenn comes up with the idea of contacting the ballerina who was replaced by Flora. Later, Leela gets home late that night, but Chris insists on taking her shopping for Amy and Lacey. They go to the stores during holiday hours where they run into Glenn, who is introduced to Chris too. When he sees them talking, Chris realizes what's going on, so he excuses himself. Leela confides in Glenn about her love for theater and how much she loves her job. They then see Santa and head toward him to make their wishes. Their renewed friendship is sealed after they take a picture with Santa. Meanwhile, Marie has her answer locked in for their bet, and Glenn still keeps getting snow globes. Glenn then gives another present with Zeke's help, and he takes Leela out to a nice dinner. There, they get to know each other more closely, and decides to get over their old differences. Marie sees this as an olive branch type of situation, but Leela is still skeptical of Glenn's intentions. Meanwhile, Glenn's parents are anxious, feeling like they are holding him back, even though he denies it. He also updates his parents regarding his progress with earning Leela's friendship. Eventually, the theater's sales go up, which shows that Glenn's strategy worked. Flora finally flies in, and everyone focuses on her like the star that she is. But that doesn't work for too long because she throws an unnecessary tantrum and refuses to rehearse. Fortunately, Leela convinces Flora to cooperate, and this gives Leela and Glenn an opportunity to connect on a deeper level, going on a night out in the city. However, they find themselves at an impasse again, because Leela still doesn't fully trust him. In another scene, Chris confronts Leela for prioritizing work over family time during Christmas, but she avoids the subject. Marie wins the bet and lectures Leela on being unwilling to trust others with her work or heart. Marie advises her to reconsider Glenn's kindness, but unfortunately, it seems Glenn has already given up on any prospect of being with her. Leela finally forgoes the opening night to spend time with her family, leaving Marie in charge, who handles everything perfectly. Leela has now realized that being a manager means that she's supposed to lead, instead of doing everything herself. She doesn't want to resent her dream job, so from now, she won't burn herself at both ends. Chris is proud of her and guides Leela to find her way back to Glenn, who clearly adores her. Leela gets praised by Helen for the successful show and finds her last gift through an elaborate scavenger hunt planned all around the theater. The last present is a crocheted, handmade scarf, which gives Leela an instant idea of who her secret Santa has been all along. This is enough to melt her heart, so she accepts and admires that Glenn really has changed for the better. Leela wears the scarf and shows up at the place Glenn mentioned in his note. They end the night and start their love of a lifetime with a magical kiss on Christmas Eve.